Claimed by the Cold Alpha. A Werewolf Shifter Romance audiobook. Written by Raelth. Chapter 1. Into the Frost. The wind howled across the northern cliffs, screaming like a creature in mourning. Snow clung to the branches of skeletal trees, and the scent of pine was smothered beneath layers of ice and blood. Beneath that sky ashen, bruised with twilight she ran. Liora's breath came in ragged gasps, white fog curling from her lips. Her legs burned, her thighs trembling, but she did not stop. Behind her, the world she'd known since birth lay in ruin, her clan shattered, her future stolen. The last time she had been touched by another wolf, it had been to restrain her wrists while a foreign alpha prepared to mark her like a possession. She would rather die in the cold. The pain in her lower belly twisted, sharp and insistent. Heat pulsed through her limbs like fire beneath the skin. Her body betrayed her with every step. Not now. Not yet. The first wave of scent rolled off her skin like crushed roses, sweet and heady with desperation. Her heat had begun. Liora stumbled through the snow, clutching her cloak tighter around herself, though it did little to mask the scent leaking from her pores. Omega. Ripe. Unclaimed. The kind of smell that drove wolves to madness. It curled into the wind, past the frostbitten pines and bare stone, toward the edge of forbidden land. Faint howls echoed behind her, distant, but gaining. She was being hunted. Not by beasts, but by men. She saw the border too late. A line of weather-worn stones marked the threshold. Beyond them, the world changed. No longer frost and pine, but heavy silence. A different kind of wildness. She crossed without hesitation, boots crunching across the invisible line where legend claimed no wolf returned sane. The Frostpeak Mountains, territory of the Frostpeak Pack. Known in whispers as the Teeth of the North. A place ruled not by kindness or law, but by dominance. A land bound to a name spoken with awe and fear, Raelth. She had heard the rumors. That he never smiled. That his last Luna candidate was buried beneath the northern cliffs. That his gaze could turn blood to ice. She was too far gone to care. Liora collapsed to her knees, gasping. Her body writhed with heat. The pressure in her lower belly clawed up her spine and into her mind, blurring thought with instinct. Then she felt it. A shift in the air. A new scent like iron and snow, ancient trees and smoke. It struck her like lightning. Alpha. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, cracked across the snow. She tried to stand. Couldn't. A growl vibrated through the trees, deep and inhuman. Her head snapped up. A figure stepped through the haze of falling snow. Tall. Black-cloaked. Hair as dark as raven's wings, skin pale as frost. And eyes. Gods, those eyes. Storm gray, rimmed in silver. Cold, unreadable, yet burning with something vast. Something ancient. She could barely breathe. Alpha. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The power in him settled over her like a mountain of ice. Her Omega instinct screamed to submit, to bare her neck. But she bared her teeth instead. A flicker of interest touched his gaze. Their scents met in the air, clashed, tangled. And then, something clicked. Not pain. Not desire. Something deeper. A pulse. A resonance. The snow between them steamed faintly. His eyes narrowed. You crossed my border, he said, voice low, gravel soft, ancient as the frost. Her lips cracked. Better here than under him. He stepped closer. She tensed, expecting chains. Expecting violence. But he only looked at her, really looked, and frowned. Like something about her scent confused him. He didn't touch her. But the growl in his chest deepened, almost possessive. She felt it again. That pull. Like a thread tied tight between her spine and his voice. She saw the guards behind him, now armed, silent, waiting. His eyes never left hers. He turned his head slightly, speaking only to them. Bring her in. No marks. Then, to her, colder than snow. You're mine now, trespasser. Chapter 2. Alpha's Command. The walls of the Frostpeak stronghold were built to break men. Not just in body but in will. They rose from the heart of the mountain like the ribs of a beast long dead, hewn from black stone and sealed with age-old runes. No light dared linger in the cells beneath the keep, and no sound echoed save for the breath of the condemned. Liora sat on the cold slab of stone that served as a bench, wrists bruised from leather restraints, her body still sore from the strain of suppressed heat. The guards had dragged her through narrow tunnels, past war-hardened warriors and staring elders, to this place where trespassers vanished. She'd seen the pity in no one's eyes. But she had stared back with her chin high, her gaze sharp. She might have crossed into their sacred territory. She might have reeked of heat and desperation and forbidden blood. But she was not weak. Not broken. Not theirs. The door creaked. 2 guards entered, flanking a figure she hadn't yet seen clearly until now. Raelth. He didn't wear a crown he didn't need to. Authority wrapped him like a second skin. Tall, lean, dressed in black and gray furs, he seemed carved of mountain ice. His expression was unreadable, but beneath the silence simmered something deeper. Rage? No. Curiosity, perhaps. Confusion. Or something worse, recognition. Bring her, he said. The voice cut like a blade. She stood before they touched her, because she would not be hauled like meat. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. The guards exchanged a glance but didn't interfere. Even they could taste the current flowing between her and their alpha. She was marched through stone corridors into the great hall of Frostpeak. The pack had gathered. Elders lined one side, warriors the other. Their gazes weighed her like scales judging worth. None of them looked at her like a person. To them, she was either threat or object. At the end of the hall stood the dais. Raelth climbed it in silence, turning to face his people. Then he pointed to her. This Omega crossed our borders during heat, he said, voice like distant thunder. She disrupted our perimeter. Her scent destabilized patrols. She is by law an intruder. A danger. Liora lifted her chin. You act as though I chose it. As though I wanted any of this. Gasps fluttered. A few warriors shifted, bristling. But Raelth didn't flinch. You chose to run, he said. You chose to come here. Whatever followed was consequence. Better consequence than being caged by an alpha twice my age, forced into a bond one didn't consent to. A murmur passed through the crowd like wind. Raelth descended the steps. Each footstep deliberate. Measured. He stopped a breath from her, gaze locked with hers. Your scent, he said lowly, carries fire. But it also carries something. Wrong. Wrong, she echoed bitterly. You mean unfamiliar. He studied her. And for the briefest seconds so fleeting she questioned if it was real, his eyes flickered, like memory brushed him. Then he turned to the gathered pack. She is to be contained. Not executed. A pause. Gasps. Protests from the elder line. Alpha, one old voice rasped, it is not custom. I am the custom, Raelth said. Silence. She will be confined in the northern ridge cabin. No contact. No visitors. I will oversee her personally. That silenced even the boldest. Raelth turned from the dais without another glance at her. Con found him that night, standing on the overlook above the wolves' burial cairns. The moon was pale above the peaks, casting the alpha's silhouette in cold silver. You're making mistakes, Con said, without preamble. Raelth didn't move. Then correct me. You should have expelled her. I didn't. You should have killed her. I didn't. Con stepped closer. Why? The wind carried their scents Raelth sharp like smoke and metal, Con's familiar cedar and ash. Raelth exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on the shadowed forest far below. She is not just an Omega. Con was quiet for a moment. You scented it too. Raelth's silence was answer enough. Con scrubbed a hand through his hair. It's not just her scent. It's the pull. I've never seen you react like that. Not even when the council tried to force you to choose a Luna. Raelth's jaw flexed. This isn't about desire. No, Con agreed. It's worse. It's fate. Liora sat on the cot in the ridge cabin, a rough woolen blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The fire crackled in the hearth. She could still feel him, Raelth etched into her nerves like smoke on stone. She didn't understand it. The way his voice made her stomach twist. The way his scent lingered in her mind. It wasn't want. Not yet. But it could be. And that terrified her more than death. She wasn't his. She would never be his. She touched her throat. Unmarked. And she would keep it that way. Chapter 3. Whispers Beneath the Skin. The ridge cabin stood alone on the frostbitten edge of the mountain, its windows shuttered against the wind, its roof buried in a blanket of fresh snow. Inside, silence reigned until it didn't. It began with a pulse. A throb in the air, subtle at first, then sharp. A ripple of tension that coiled down the mountain like heat sliding under ice. Liora woke with a gasp. Her skin burned. Her throat was dry. Her body traitorous and raw arched against the furs beneath her. The scent that rose from her skin was unmistakable. She was in heat. Again. But this time, it was stronger. Hungrier. No, she whispered, curling inward, trying to breathe through the fire in her veins. Not now. But her body didn't listen. Omegas never got to choose. The scent she released sweet, aching, feral poured into the cabin like spilled wine. It seeped through stone and wood, crept through gaps in the shutters, and bled into the snow-heavy air. Down below, in the Frostpeak Keep, every wolf lifted their heads. Raelth was already moving. He reached the ridge cabin in minutes. By the time he entered shoulders rimmed with frost, breath barely visible in the cold, he was no longer thinking clearly. The scent hit him like a wall. A storm of roses and thunder and flame. His fangs pressed against his tongue. His wolf paced inside him, teeth bared. Liora was on the floor, curled beside the hearth, trembling. Her cheeks were flushed. Her lips parted. Her eyes, when they met his, were glazed with heat yet still defiant. Still sharp enough to cut. She didn't beg. She didn't weep. She growled. "Get out," she hissed, her voice broken, breathless. He didn't move. He couldn't. The air between them was thick with tension, rich with scent. His control strained, every instinct screaming to take, to mark, to bury himself in her until nothing else existed. "You should have locked the door," she muttered, trying to pull her cloak tighter around her shoulders. Her body betrayed her, scenting the air like a call. His hands curled at his sides. "I did." She laughed, ragged and aching. "Then why are you here?" "I smelled you." A beat. "You called." "I didn't." She clenched her jaw. "Not for you." Raelth took a step closer. Liora recoiled, but not far. Her back hit the wall. Her legs folded beneath her. The firelight licked across her skin, painting her in gold and shadow. Her scent flooded his lungs, and still he didn't touch her. "Stop," she whispered. "Whatever you're thinking. Don't." He crouched before her, eyes level with hers. "You're in pain." "I'm used to pain." He could hear the truth in her voice. She had lived her life under threat, always on the edge of being claimed. But she had never bowed. Not to them. Not to him. Raelth reached for her slowly, carefully. Fingertips brushed her wrist. She flinched. Her scent spiked. He froze. Everything in him snapped taut. The urge was blinding. To take. To bite. To taste. His hand moved to her throat, hovering, not touching. A ghost of a claim. Liora stared at him wide-eyed, furious, breath-catching. "Do it," she spat. "Go on. That's what you alphas do, right? You take." The accusation landed like a blade. And Raelth, cold, unshakable Raelth, reeled back as if struck. He rose, fists clenched, and turned from her. Liora blinked, chest heaving, confused by the sudden retreat. She had braced for pain, for domination, for the brutal finality of the mark. But he didn't touch her again. He moved to the window and threw it open. Snow held in. With a single breath, he summoned his own scent, sharp, controlled, dominant, and pushed it into the air like a shield. It smothered hers, blanketing the mountain in a signal, "She is under my protection. None may come." It took everything he had. The moment the wind carried the message away, he slammed the shutters closed. Then, and only then, did he look back. "You're not ready," he said, voice hoarse. "And I won't be the one to break you." Liora's throat tightened. She didn't understand why her eyes burned. Raelth turned to leave. At the doorway, he paused just long enough to whisper, "Next time, scream louder." The door shut behind him. And Liora, still burning, still breathless, stared at the empty space where he'd been. Chapter 4. The Luna Candidate. Snow fell in soft, silent veils over Frostpeak, the sky pale as old bone. The wind carried the scent of storm and frostbark resin, curling down into the stone-blooded heart of the stronghold where the council had gathered. Liora stood in the center of the circular chamber, surrounded by stone columns etched with ancient runes, her breath a thin mist in the cold. She was still wearing the same coarse tunic from the Ridge Cabin. No armor. No rank. Just defiance in her spine and questions in her blood. She shouldn't have been there. And yet she was. Elder Mathen, voice thin and cracked with age, raised his staff and brought it down upon the stone floor once, twice, 3 times. The room quieted, as tradition demanded. "We are gathered in the Moon Hall, by blood and right," he declared, to announce the approaching hunt of the silver moon. 3 full moons from now, the Luna trial shall begin. A hushed thrill passed through the gathered. Liora blinked, her jaw tightening. Luna trials. So that was what this was. She had heard of such things. Most Omega girls whispered about them like fairy tales. Trials of strength, poise, and spirit undertaken by candidates to claim the honor of standing beside the Alpha. A Luna was not merely a mate. She was a sovereign of instinct and grace. A bridge between the divine and the mortal. A throne carved from bone and loyalty. It was not a place meant for someone like her. Elder Mathen continued, "The Alpha has not yet taken a Luna, nor recognized a bond. The trials are thus open, as custom decrees, to all eligible females of standing." Teria, standing near the stone bench to Liora's left, straightened with pride. Her ash-blonde hair was braided tight, her armor gleaming with ceremonial polish. A beta of noble birth, sharp-eyed, bold, hungry. Liora recognized her immediately as someone who expected to win. To her right, Hina smiled faintly, lips painted with crushed berries, eyes half-lidded with practiced charm. An Omega too, but one bred for allure. Her scent was subtle, coaxing, dangerous. And then there was Liora. Out of place. Unclaimed. Unchosen. A trespasser. "For have already stepped forward," said Mathen. "But this morning, the Wolf Shrine gave us a sign." He gestured to the side. 2 guards entered, bearing a ceremonial basin between them. Inside, nestled among bloodroot leaves, burned a flickering silver flame. "The spirit fire lit on its own," Mathen said, awe threading through his voice. "Only once before has it burned unbidden." Raelth stepped forward from the shadows at the edge of the chamber. His cloak was dusted in snow, his expression unreadable. His eyes found Liora. "The shrine flame reacts only to a bond prophesied," another elder whispered. "It is the wolf god sign. One of the chosen is already bound to the Alpha." The words hit the chamber like thunder. Liora's stomach twisted. She felt dozens of eyes turned toward her, some with disbelief, others with thinly veiled disgust. "No," Raelth said, voice low. Firm. "There has been no claim." "But the Spirifier does not lie," Elder Eileen murmured. "She must step forward." "I did not invite her to the trials," Raelth replied coldly. "She bears the mark of fate," said Mathen. "Alpha, even you cannot refute the divine." Liora's fists clenched. "I didn't ask for this," she said, voice sharp. "I never asked for any of this." Raelth's eyes darkened, but he said nothing. The silence stretched until Hina's soft voice cut through. "Perhaps she is afraid." Teria gave a short, dismissive laugh. "Or perhaps she knows she'd be outmatched." Liora turned slowly. "I'm not afraid of either of you," she said. "But I don't belong in your games." Mathen gestured toward the flame again. "The gods disagree." The chamber was still. Raelth didn't look at her. But Liora could feel him, standing like a glacier at her back, refusing to acknowledge the scent that still remembered hers. Refusing to speak the truth aloud. Because if he said it, if he gave it breath, it would become real. She stared at the flame. And then, as if guided by something beyond her, she stepped forward. The moment her skin came near the silver flame, it surged. Light burst upward, flaring into the vaulted ceiling, licking toward the carvings of the wolf god etched into the stone. Every rune on the shrine shimmered with pale blue light. Gasping voices echoed through the chamber. The spirit fire had answered her. Raelth stepped forward at last. "This is not possible." "Alpha," said Mathen gently, "you know as well as any the spirit fire has no loyalty to blood or logic. Only bond." Raelth's jaw tightened. His hands were still at his sides, but his aura rippled with restrained energy. "You want to put her through the trials," he said coldly. "She's not from this pack. She carries no crest. No name." "She carries something more," Eileen said. "She carries the mark of the divine." For a moment, Liora almost stepped back. But then she looked at the flame silver, defiant, beautiful in its fury. And she thought, "Let them try to extinguish me." She lifted her chin. "I'll do it," she said. "If your gods want me to dance, I'll give them fire." Chapter 5. The Eyes of the Pack. The training grounds of Frostpeak were etched into the mountain's belly, half snow-dusted stone, half ancient, trampled earth. Once a sacred hunting hollow, it had been converted into a proving ground for strength, instinct, and survival, especially for those who dared claim the Luna's path. Liora stood in its center, stripped of pretense and protection. Only a fitted leather tunic and bracers shielded her from the bite of the cold. Her hair was tied back in a rough braid, her boots caked with frost. The others circled her like wolves. Teria led them, of course, her gait purposeful, chin held high. Hina followed behind, veil-thin fabric floating around her like mist, eyes half-lidded with amusement. The third girl, a beta named Vera, had barely spoken a word, but her glare had made her position known, outsider, unwelcome. Liora didn't speak either. She didn't need to. The instructor, an old grizzled beta named Orin, barked commands. First trial combat instinct. Circle sparring. Submission earns a mark against you. Teria's lip curled. Only fair to start with the weakest. She stepped into the ring without waiting. Liora followed, shoulders loose, eyes narrowed. They circled. "You shouldn't be here," Teria hissed. "I didn't ask to be. You'll break before first blood." "We'll see." Teria moved first. Her strike was fast, clever, but telegraphed. Liora ducked low and swept her leg, forcing the beta off balance. Teria recovered quickly, spinning, claws flashing. The crowd of observers leaned forward, silent. Liora dodged, then twisted her body in a way that looked wrong. Too fluid. Too precise. And then she struck once, under Teria's ribs. Not brute force. Precision. Leverage. Teria staggered back, breath gone, eyes wide. The ring fell quiet. Even Orin looked surprised. "You've been trained," he said. Liora straightened. "I've survived." He didn't press. Teria scowled, rubbing her ribs. That wasn't Frostpeak technique. Liora didn't answer. Because she was right. Later that day, Liora stood beneath the stone arch leading into the upper barracks, hands aching from hours of blade forms and scent tracking. The other candidates had already peeled off in twos and threes, whispering among themselves, casting glances that bled with contempt or curiosity. She was alone. Until Khan appeared. He came not as a beta second, but as someone who knew how it felt to be watched like prey. He leaned against the stone column beside her, arms crossed. "You made an impression," he said mildly. "I wasn't trying to. You succeeded anyway." She glanced at him. "Are you here to report back to your alpha?" "No," Khan said. "I'm here because you looked like you needed someone to talk to who isn't trying to bite your head off." She let out a breath. Not quite a laugh, but close. Khan tilted his head. "You fight like someone who's not from here." Liora shrugged. "I'm not." "Where did you learn to move like that?" She didn't answer immediately. "I don't remember." It wasn't a lie. Not fully. She remembered fragments, flames, snow, a woman's voice teaching her how to twist her wrist, not punch straight. But not names. Not faces. Not home. Khan didn't press. But his gaze lingered on her stance, thoughtful. "You smell different when you move like that," he said quietly. Her stomach tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means you don't move like prey." That caught her off guard. Khan looked back toward the yard. "Don't let Raelth's silence fool you. He notices everything. You keep fighting like this, he'll have to stop pretending he doesn't see you." Liora scoffed. "Why would I want him to see me?" Khan didn't smile, but something softened around his eyes. Because even if he won't admit it, you're already in his blood. She looked away. He doesn't feel anything. No, Khan said, but he fights everything he feels. That's worse. That night, Liora sat on the edge of her cot in the barracks assigned to trial candidates. Her body ached, but it wasn't the bruises that kept her awake. It was the memory of Terria's words. The way the others looked at her. She didn't belong. And yet when she closed her eyes, she could feel the movements she'd used today still humming through her muscles. Techniques no Frostpeak-born wolf would know. You move like someone bred for war. Where had she learned that? She had no pack crest. No documented bloodline. But her bones remembered. And somewhere in the marrow of her being, something slept. Something old. Something burning. Chapter 6. The Trial of Blood. The air reeked of steel and frost. Snow fell in fine dust over the stone ring carved into the forest, clearing an ancient arena walled with obsidian stakes and the bleached bones of those who'd failed before. Tonight was no simple challenge. It was the blood trial. Each Luna candidate was to enter the ring alone. No weapons. No scent dampeners. Just instinct, claws, and teeth. One by one, they would be locked in with a Nightwolf. A test not only of strength, but of restraint, the ability to fight and not lose control. To dominate without succumbing to madness. Liora stood barefoot in the snow, every breath stinging her lungs. Her body had not fully recovered from the past week's training, and her dreams had grown stranger, filled with fire, shadowed faces, and distant howls. Her turn would come last. By design, she suspected. Raelth stood at the edge of the ring, arms crossed. His cloak snapped in the wind. He'd spoken no words to her since the day the spear of fire rose. But he was always watching. She could feel his gaze like a second heartbeat. Teria went first. She moved like a soldier, balanced and proud. The Nightwolf lunged, jaws snapping, but she dodged with calculated grace. Her strikes were rehearsed, efficient, textbook Frostpeak form. Within minutes, the beast lay still at her feet, neck broken, throat untouched. Controlled. Precise. The crowd approved. Hina followed, her tactics softer, more evasive. She lured the Nightwolf into a pattern, scenting the air with submission, then turning sharp and lethal. She left the beast alive, unconscious, submitting beneath her heel. Gasps. Murmurs. Approval. Then came Liora. She stepped into the ring with no bow, no flourish. Only silence. The iron gate clanged shut behind her. Across the ring, the Nightwolf emerged from the shadows. Larger than the others. Black-furred, scarred, half-mad with hunger. Liora's fingers twitched. Her pulse quickened, but it wasn't fear. It was something deeper. The wolf lunged. She moved. Not like Teria. Not like Hina. Not even like a Frostpeak warrior. She dropped low, unnaturally fast and twisted, letting the beast's momentum slide past her. Her bare feet barely touched the snow. She struck not with claws, but with open palm to its ribs. The beast snarled, spun too late. Liora's eyes flashed gold. Then her body began to change. Not fully, no full transformation, but enough. Her muscles rippled. Bones shifted beneath skin. Her nails lengthened into onyx-tipped claws. Her canines grew. Her hair whipped around her like flame. A half-form. Controlled. Deadly. Beautiful. The crowd gasped. From the circle's edge, Raelth's body tensed like a pulled bowstring. Liora moved like water, her form both beast and woman. She didn't kill the Nightwolf, she forced it to submit. Drove it to its knees, growling in a language older than words. Her hands gripped its scruff. Her voice echoed, not quite human. Submit. The beast whined. Bowed. Then silence. She released it. It crawled to the edge of the ring and lay down, whimpering. The gate opened. Liora stepped out, panting, shoulders heaving. Her eyes had returned to normal. Her limbs mostly human. Her hands shook. The elders were silent. Then Elder Eileen rose. Her voice trembled. That was not Frostpeak form. No, another said. That was something else. Raelth finally stepped forward. His voice cut the air clean in two. She used the red circle technique. Gasps. Eileen turned to him. You speak of myth. He looked at Liora, his expression unreadable. It's no myth. That was flame blood combat. The kind passed down from the fallen lineage. Teria scoffed. Impossible. The flame bloods were wiped out 10 winters ago. Raelth didn't answer her. He was still watching Liora. Not with suspicion. With recognition. Later, Liora crouched by the spring just beyond the ring's edge, washing the blood from her fingers. Her reflection shimmered in the icy water pail, otherworldly, marked by something she couldn't name. She didn't remember ever being taught how to move like that. She'd never seen a half-form before. But something inside her had remembered. Not her mind. Her blood. A shadow fell across her. Raelth. She didn't turn. You were silent for days. Now you look at me like I'm a ghost. You moved like one of them. Liora stood slowly. One of who? He didn't answer. But his voice dropped low. Where did you learn it? I didn't, she said. It just came. He stepped closer. Not touching her. But near enough that the cold between them melted into heat. There's only one bloodline that could survive that technique without tearing themselves apart, he said. And that bloodline was erased. Liora stared at him. Maybe not. Raelth's joy tightened. If you are who I think you are, this trial is the least of your dangers. Then why not kill me now? A beat. Because I'm not sure I want to. Chapter 7. The Moonlit Cage. The mountains swallowed sound. High above the Frostpeak barracks, past the watchfires and the howling cliffs, a lone cave opened in the stone like a wound. No light touched its entrance. Only wind and the weight of ancient silence. Liora had been taken there at dusk. No words. No trial verdict. Just a quiet order from Raelth, spoken to 2 guards, and she was escorted up the mountain path under the rising moon. No restraints, just the unspoken threat of the Alpha's presence a few steps behind. She'd expected a prison. Instead, she found solitude. And stone. And him. The cave wasn't deep, but its interior was smooth with old carvings. Symbols she didn't recognize, spirals, claws, crescent moons etched into the walls. A place older than the pack. Older than memory. A place meant for truths that couldn't survive the village below. Raelth stood at the entrance now, arms crossed, silent. You could have just thrown me into the dungeons, Liora said, pacing. You needed distance. From you. From everyone. His gaze was unreadable. You've stirred more than you understand. She turned on him. Because I defended myself in a trial you approved? Because your scent is fire in a dry forest, he snapped, voice low. Because you don't know what your body's calling or what it might answer. Liora's eyes narrowed. So this is what I am now? A hazard? A thing to isolate and muzzle. You are an omega in transition. You don't know what you're becoming. No, she said sharply. But you do, don't you? Raelth didn't answer. The silence crackled. Their scents filled the cave, hers hot, rich, storm-laced, his sharp and iron-heavy, alpha through and through. No breeze to carry them away. Just stillness. And heat. She stepped closer. If you're so concerned about my scent, Alpha, maybe you should stop following it. He stiffened. Don't. Don't what? Breathe near you? Speak. His eyes darkened. Don't tempt me. Something feral flickered in her. Why? Are you afraid I'll win? She saw it then the moment his control fractured. Raelth crossed the space between them in a breath. His hand slammed into the wall beside her head, not touching her but close enough for her to feel the tremor in his limbs. His scent burst like crushed steel and smoke, curling around her, seeping into her skin. You're not ready for what I want, he said. His voice was hoarse, tattered at the edges. Liora's heart pounded. Then why are you still here? Their breath mingled. Her back pressed against cold stone. Her skin flushed. Raelth leaned in so close she could feel the heat of his lips over her pulse point. His nose grazed her throat, just once. Her body arched before she could stop it. Don't make me forget who I am, he whispered, voice breaking. Don't make me forget what you are. She didn't move. Then why do I feel like I already have? He made a sound, half growl, half wounded exhale. His forehead dropped to hers. And for a moment, there was silence. Then, I can't mark you, he said. Not here. Not like this. Liora swallowed. But you want to. His grip tightened on the stone. Yes, that single word was a blade to her chest. Because it was the only truth either of them had spoken. You think locking me away will make me less dangerous, she said, voice shaking now. But you're not afraid of what I'll become. She looked up into his eyes. You're afraid of what I make you. Raelth stepped back as if burned. You shouldn't be able to affect me this way. Liora's lips parted in a smile. Not soft. Not cruel. Just sure. Then stop acting like you want to. That night, he slept at the cave's entrance, spine to the stone, eyes wide open. She slept with his scent on her skin, curled in furs, half wild with something she couldn't name. Neither of them dreamed. But the moon watched. And it remembered. Chapter 8, The Touch of Fate. Snow fell in spiraling silence as the Frostpeak Pack assembled at the summit shrine. The sacred stone stood tall, its surface black as night and etched with veins of moonlight quartz. It was called the Heartstone, an ancient relic from the first Luna's time, buried in the cold bones of the mountain and whispered to contain the breath of the wolf god. Only bonded pairs could awaken it. It had not glowed in decades. Liora stood barefoot before it, her breath misting in the icy air. A ceremonial band of rawhide wrapped her wrists. She was wrapped in thick furs, but the weight on her shoulders came not from cold. Raelth stood beside her, rigid, silent, a stone carved into the shape of a man. The elders formed a circle around them, staffs buried into the snow, eyes gleaming beneath frost-rimmed hoods. Elder Eilaine's voice rang through the shrine clearing. Today we test what has been foretold. The Spirifier has spoken. The blood trial confirmed. Now we seek divine confirmation through scent, spirit, and bond. Raelth's jaw tensed. Do you submit to the trial, Alpha Raelth? She asked. I do, he said, voice flat. Do you, Liora of No Known Pack? I do. Then let the Heartstone judge. Two attendants stepped forward. They carried narrow blades of polished obsidian. Liora didn't flinch as the blade slid across her palm. The sting barely registered. Raelth's hand bled the same, his movements mechanical. Their blood fell together, 2 drops onto the Heartstone's base. The air stilled. The Heartstone remained cold. For a breath. Then 2. Then it began to glow. Faint at first, like embers beneath ash. Then brighter, suffused with a light that pulsed not with color, but with scent. The sharp tang of alpha dominance mingled with the ache-sweet call of an omega in full bloom. Raelth took a step back. No, he growled, voice breaking. The Heartstone flared. From within its core, veins of silver light streaked upward like lightning. The runes glowed, and a low hum began to rise, deep, reverent, unyielding. Snow swirled violently in place, as if drawn to the stone's breath. They are bound, Elder Eilain whispered, eyes wide. Fated. Chosen. Liora's heart beat so loudly it drowned the wind. Raelth turned sharply to the elders. No. Alpha, I reject this. His voice was no longer calm. It thundered across the clearing like a storm. I will not take her as Luna. Gasps echoed in every direction. One elder stumbled back. Another dropped his staff. The glow from the Heartstone dimmed, but did not vanish. She is not of our blood, Raelth said, his eyes fixed on the stone as though it had betrayed him. She is fire. Chaos. She will unravel this pack. Yet your scent answers hers, Eilain said gently. Even now, the stone sings with it. I do not accept fate, Raelth snarled. Liora took a step forward. Because you're afraid of it. He turned toward her slowly. You think I don't see it? She continued, voice quiet, razor sharp. You're not angry at the gods. You're angry that they didn't give you a choice. And now you're punishing me for it. Don't presume to know me, he said. I don't have to, she said. I feel it every time you're near me. You're not cold, Raelth. You're just burned. Silence rippled through the crowd. The elders said nothing. Liora looked at the stone again. It still glowed faintly. She stepped back from it. I never asked to be chosen, she said, turning to the elders. But I won't beg to be kept. Raelth didn't stop her. He didn't say a word. As she walked away from the circle, the snow fell harder. Not in anger. Not in sorrow. But in silence. And still, the Heartstone glowed. Chapter 9, The Night of Low Whispers. The wind moved through the treetops like a beast unshackled. Liora stirred beneath the furs in the barracks alcove, her body aching, skin still humming from the touch of the heartstone. Though she lay alone, it felt as if something ancient watched her from the darkness behind her eyes. Sleep dragged her down not with peace, but with gravity. And then she was no longer in her bed. She stood in a wide hall of flame-lit stone, its walls carved with crescent moons and wolves with wings. Smoke curled above her, thick with myrrh and something metallic like blood. A great brazier burned at the center of the space, and beyond it stood a figure. Tall, barefoot, draped in black. His hair fell to his shoulders like onyx silk, his jaw sharp, his skin pale beneath the flickering firelight. His eyes, however, were what struck her still. They were silver, rimmed in red. He looked at her with recognition, with sorrow, and something close to reverence. "You've taken too long," he said. Liora stiffened. "Who are you?" He stepped forward, slow, cautious. "You bear the flame, yet you don't know it." She tried to back away, but her feet would not move. "The stone has spoken. The bond has called. But the fire still sleeps in your blood." "I don't understand." "You will." The flames behind him pulsed brighter. Shadows danced. "You're the last daughter of the fallen line," he said. The air the fire did not consume. The one they couldn't find. Couldn't break. Her throat tightened. "Flame blood." He gave a small nod. "You are not just an Omega, Liora." He took another step, his voice lowering. "You are the moonborn flame." And then his hand reached toward her, not with hunger, not with threat, but with a touch of aching familiarity. "You are the Flame Queen's blood." She woke gasping. Sweat clung to her skin, despite the chill air of the mountain morning. Her palms were shaking. Her scent had bloomed through the room in the night, laced with alarm and something sharper: adrenaline, memory, fear. She threw off the covers, needing air. Khan found her sitting on a low stone wall near the wolf kennels, her arms wrapped around her knees, hair tangled with sleep and snow. He didn't say anything at first. Then, quietly, "Bad dream." She looked at him. "Have you ever heard of the Flamebloods being called the Moonborn Flame?" Khan blinked. "Where did you hear that?" "I don't know. I think," she swallowed. "I think someone said it to me in a dream." Khan's jaw tightened. He looked out over the snowy slope. "That name hasn't been spoken aloud in Frostpeak in a long time. So it's real." He hesitated. Once, the Flamebloods were believed to be touched by both the sun and the moon, fire and silver. It was said their Omegas could command beasts and dreams, that their lunas burned brighter than stars. And now, they were hunted, wiped out. He looked at her carefully. "Raelth says the line is dead." Liora exhaled, her voice shaking. "But what if it isn't?" Khan didn't answer. He just reached out and placed a hand over hers. "Then you'll have enemies you haven't even seen yet." Far above them, half hidden among the trees, Raelth stood still as frost. He hadn't intended to follow her, and yet his steps had carried him here. He'd felt her panic through the bond that he refused to name. That persistent pull, that burn under the skin. He watched as she spoke to Khan, too close, too open, and something shifted in his chest. Not rage, not jealousy. Something deeper, something older. The feeling of something slipping through fingers he hadn't meant to close. Her scent was still wild from sleep, but it carried something new. Power, recognition, memory. Raelth turned away before she could sense him, disappearing back into the forest like a shadow unclaimed. But the name echoed in him long after. Moonborn Flame. Chapter 10, The Mark. Liora's arm throbbed, a low burn beneath skin and sinew. The wound she'd taken during her final trial match had been shallow Terria's blade skimming too close, meant to draw humiliation more than blood. But something about the cut had festered overnight, not with infection, but with heat. Not fever. Fire. Ira's hands moved deftly, smoothing poultice across Liora's skin as steam rose from the herbal basin beside them. The healer's chamber, carved directly into the belly of Frostpeak's central keep, smelled of sage, moss, and ashwood. Runes carved along the shelves whispered with every flickering candle. "You're burning beneath the skin," Ira murmured, her pale brows drawing close. "Yet your blood runs clean." Liora said nothing. She stared at the stone ceiling, jaw tight. Ira drew her arm closer. The poultice had softened the dried blood. As the cloth peeled back, the skin along Leora's inner wrist was revealed raw, angry red, the wound's edges laced with glowing heat. Then both women froze. Beneath the scabbed over scrape, faint but unmistakable, was a sigil. A ring of flame. No, a wheel of fire. A smooth, circular brand formed not by blade or burn, but beneath the skin itself, as if blood and bone had remembered something the body had forgotten. The healer whispered, "Flame-bound." Liora sat up. "What?" But Ira was already wrapping her wrist again with a sudden urgency, her touch trembling. "Do not show this to anyone," the elder murmured. "Not until you understand what it means." Liora stared at her. "You know." "I know stories," Ira replied, not meeting her eyes. "And stories are dangerous." Raelth found out hours later. Ira had sent a sealed message, an oathbreaker's risk, but she had served his father before him. Raelth arrived alone in the healer's chamber, the ink barely dry on the warning. "What did you see?" he asked. Ira didn't look up from her boiling herbs. "What I feared I would." "Tell me." "She carries it," Ira said, voice brittle. "The flame brand. In her wrist. Just like the queens of the old line." Raelth didn't speak. Not at first. But the air in the room shifted, the stone around him pulsing with the force of his scent, pure dominance, sharpened with panic. "She doesn't know," Ira added quickly. "I don't think she even realizes what it means." Raelth's eyes darkened. "Then others will soon enough." Later, alone in his war chamber, Raelth pored over the old records. Tattered scrolls. Charred pages. Sealed archives meant never to be opened again. They called it the Flame Circle, a trait only born to Lunas of the Flame bloodline, said to be awakened through trials of blood, fire, and bond. It had not been seen in 12 winters, not since the last Flame Queen was dragged from her throne and burned with her Omega court in the southern square. Her daughter had never been found. Until now. The elders convened that night under veil of shadow. "She must be cleansed," one rasped. "She was chosen by the Heartstone," another countered. "And if she is flame-born, then what does that mean for the prophecy?" Raelth stood apart from them, listening in silence. It would begin again, the same fear, the same cries for purity and law. But this time, he was not a boy clinging to the edge of power. This time, he knew exactly what they feared. Because it wasn't her bloodline. It was that she was stronger than them all and already half in his heart. That night, Liora sat beneath the moon in the back gardens, her wrist wrapped, her thoughts unraveled. Something pulsed beneath the bandages, not pain, but power. A call. She couldn't tell if it came from the wound or from the man whose presence she could no longer ignore, even in silence. Raelth had not come to see her. But she could feel him. Watching. Waiting. Breaking. Chapter 11. Echoes of the Flame Blood. The fire in the Alpha's war chamber burned low, casting long shadows across the stone floor, where frost had crept in through the cracks. Snow drifted against the narrow windows like silent witnesses. Liora stood just within the threshold. She hadn't been summoned, she came because the questions inside her could no longer be caged. And because some part of her fragile, reckless, still wanted to believe he would choose her over duty. Over fear. Raelth was facing the hearth, his broad back to her, hands braced against the cold mantle as if holding the weight of the mountain itself. She swallowed the hesitation in her throat. "I saw the mark." He didn't move. "It's not a birthmark. It wasn't there before the trial. It burned into me after the bloodshed." Still silence. "I know what it means," she pressed, stepping forward. Ira tried to hide it. "But it's in your records, isn't it? In your old war logs. That sigil, the flame wheel. It belonged to the flame bloodline." A beat. Then Raelth's voice, low and hollow. "Yes." The single word landed like a verdict. Liora's hands clenched at her sides. "So it's true." He said nothing. "I want to know what happened," she demanded, voice rising. "Not the stories the elders feed to their sons. Your truth. What did you do to them?" He turned then, slowly, his face half-lit by firelight, carved in storm and shadow. "There was a village," he said, voice brittle. They said it sheltered the last of the flame-blooded Omega court. The High Alpha ordered it purged. Her breath hitched. And you obeyed. I led the strike. A silence fractured the air between them. Liora took a step back, eyes wide. How many? Raelth's jaw tightened. Too many to count. She felt it like a punch to the gut. And you'd do it again? No. His answer came too fast. Liora stared at him. But you'd do it to me. Raelth said nothing. He didn't need to. His eyes said everything his mouth refused to speak. If I am one of them, she whispered, voice trembling, if that blood is in me, if I am the last heir, what happens then, Raelth? His voice cracked across the stone like ice. Then I will end you. A strangled breath caught in her throat. She wanted to scream. To hit him. To force the truth out of him, not the one he wielded like a sword, but the one she'd seen in his eyes 100 times now. That he felt her. That he wanted her. That he had already chosen her long before fate laid its curse. But instead, her voice came out broken. You're lying. His gaze didn't waver. I don't lie. No, she said bitterly, turning from him. You just bury the truth so deep you forget it exists. She strode toward the door, but his voice stopped her. I saw a child once, he said quietly. In the ashes. She froze. She was no older than 10. Burned but alive. Hidden beneath her nurse's corpse. The soldiers were waiting for my order. His voice was a raw wind now. I told them she was already dead. I let her go. A pause. I never saw her again. Liora turned her head slowly. You think that was me? Raelth didn't answer. But something inside her shifted. She didn't remember fire. She didn't remember blood. But she remembered screaming. Running. The taste of salt and iron and soot. And suddenly she wasn't sure if her dreams were dreams at all. I don't need your mercy, she whispered. Raelth's hands curled into fists. It wouldn't be mercy. It would be treason. Liora stepped into the hall, her voice flat. Then prepare your blade, Alpha. Because if I fall, it won't be from your hand. The door closed behind her with a soft thud. Raelth stood in the silence, staring at the space she'd left behind like it was a grave. He touched his chest. There was no wound. And yet it ached. He had killed before. Buried rivals. Spilled blood to protect this mountain. But he had never once felt the cut afterward. Until now. Liora didn't cry until she was alone. The tears were not for him, but for the part of herself that had hoped. Hoped he would choose her. Hoped fate could be rewritten. But hope was a luxury she no longer had. From now on, she would rise for herself. Fight for herself. Bleed alone, burn alone. She would not beg. She would become fire. Chapter 12. The Punishment Rite. Snow fell in slow spirals, softening the edges of the world, everything but her. Liora stood barefoot on the stone altar, surrounded by frostbitten pines and watchful eyes. Her cloak had been stripped from her back, bearing skin pale as moonlight and marked by old bruises that told no one's story but her own. She didn't flinch. She didn't bow. She met her punishment like she met everything, spine straight, chin high, eyes defiant. And Raelth hated that he admired her for it. He approached in silence. Boots pressed into virgin snow. Leather whispered against his fingers as he uncoiled the cold lash, an ancient whip dyed dark with ceremonial ink, never blood. But something about today felt different. More feral. More real. The crowd stood hushed behind the ritual stones. Elders, warriors, Luna contenders, none of them dared speak. Because this punishment was not routine. The Alpha had chosen to deliver it himself. And the Omega before him was not his. But something deeper inside him had already begun to forget that. The moment he stood behind her, scent hit him like wildfire. Her heat had faded, but the ghost of it lingered. Amber and crushed petals, iron and ash. Omega, but not docile. Omega, but dangerous. His hand trembled once before steadying. She looked over her shoulder. You came to break me, she asked, voice as low as a growl. Or to see if you already had? Raelth said nothing. Instead, he raised the lash and let it fall. The first strike wasn't hard. It was precise. The leather kissed across the slope of her shoulder, painting fire into her skin. She gasped not from pain, but from how sharply her nerves lit up beneath it. Her body arched involuntarily. Raelth's breath faltered. "One," she whispered. Her voice was raw velvet. Torn silk. He clenched the handle tighter. The second strike landed across her lower back, the edge biting just above the curve of her hips. She shuddered, sharp and sensual. Her scent spiked. Not fear. Not agony. Want. The crowd couldn't smell it like he could. Didn't see how her thighs pressed together. Didn't notice the way the mark at her nape, still unclaimed, throbbed like a wound. But he did. Gods, he did. "Say it," he growled. She turned her head, eyes hooded. "Two." He swallowed hard. Her skin glowed under the moonlight, each welt a ribbon of red. But what undid him wasn't the marks. It was the way her body moved beneath his lash, like it recognized him. Like some primal thread deep within her welcomed the pain, the dominance, the presence of an alpha who wouldn't look away. Wouldn't run. The third strike was too low. It landed across her upper thigh, and the crack echoed like thunder. She cried out, half moan, half breath, and braced herself against the altar with both hands. The scent of slick hit him like a fist. And for a single second, Raelth nearly lost control. He stepped in. Too close. Close enough that her back grazed his chest as she caught her breath. Her scent drenched him. Her heat teased him. He could see the faint sheen of moisture between her legs, sliding down the inside of her thigh like a secret no one else could see. He almost dropped the whip. "Three," she whispered, trembling. He reached for her shoulder, not to hurt, but to steady himself. His fingers brushed her bare skin. She gasped, body arching. Her pulse thudded against his palm like a second heartbeat. He leaned down, breath hot against the shell of her ear. "You're not afraid of me." "I was," she said. "But not anymore." He gritted his teeth. This was no longer a right. It was a fucking temptation. A ruin waiting to happen. He raised the whip for the fourth. But his hand shook. She tilted her head toward him, lips parted, voice barely a murmur. "What will you do if I ask for it?" He froze. The leather slipped through his fingers. Fell to the snow. He turned away. "Enough. You're ending it?" Her voice was hoarse with challenge. "Or yourself." He didn't answer. Couldn't. Because if he stayed 1 second longer, he'd press her against the stone. He'd bury himself in her heat. He'd mark her so deeply the gods themselves would turn their gaze. So he walked away. From the cliffs above, Khan's knuckles were white. His alpha's control had always been mythic. Until now. And if Raelth fell for an unclaimed, untamed Omega with royal blood, then Frostpeak would fall with him. That night, Liora lay awake in her furs, every welt on her back still burning. But not from pain. From him. Every breath she took tasted like withheld pleasure. Every touch she imagined came from his hands. And her body, wild, knowing, cruel, welcomed the ache. Chapter 13. The Arrival of the Outsider. The air was too still. Frostpeak was not used to silk-lined banners or the gleam of golden pauldrons, least of all from Western Ridge, whose envoys were famed for their excess and veiled ambitions. Liora watched from a distant terrace as the line of riders curved into the valley like a frozen blade. At the head rode a woman whose posture did not bow, whose pale blue cloak did not ripple despite the wind. Nevaeh, the alpha daughter of Western Ridge. Raelth is intended by treaty, by bloodline, by everything Liora was not. When Nevaeh dismounted in the central square, the Frostpeak guard bowed low. Raelth didn't. He stood, motionless as ice, his eyes unreadable. Even Khan beside him seemed tenser than usual, as if bracing for a storm not yet spoken aloud. Nevaeh smiled. "Still don't kneel, Alpha?" Raelth's voice was flat. "Not to wolves who come bearing chains." Her lips curved, amused. "Then you've forgotten the chain you forged yourself." She stepped closer. She was beautiful, in the way frostbite was beautiful, deadly and delicate, glinting with hidden danger. Every line of her posture screamed nobility. Authority. Ownership. She did not speak again until she was directly in front of him. Then, softly, "You made a vow, Raelth. To our alliance." "To me." Liora turned away before she heard his reply. She shouldn't care. She didn't care. But her hands shook anyway as she descended the steps back toward the training field. The whispers in the stone halls were already growing of political ties, of western ridges offer of grain, soldiers, and winter-stable steel. Of the Alpha Bride. That evening, the council feasted in the great hall. Nevia sat at Raelth's side. She wore silver armor over velvet, her braid coiled like a crown. Her fingers occasionally grazed Raelth's goblet or the fur at his shoulder. Possessive. Intentional. Liora was seated several paces away, among the lower-ranked Luna contenders. But even from a distance, she could feel the tension between them like a rope pulled too taut, fraying at its core. Nevia's eyes met hers across the fire pit. And she smiled. It was not kind. Later, Liora escaped the hall and climbed to the snow-slick edge of the border tower, the place where the wind was loud enough to drown her thoughts. But it wasn't enough. She needed distance. She needed breath. She needed the freedom to burn again without suffocating in that woman's perfume. So she went to the barracks and asked for transfer. Khan found her the next morning rolling bandages for the scouting pack. You want the border? Yes. You'll be gone for weeks. No medicine. No shielding if your heat comes again. I'll manage. Why? She looked up at him, eyes steady. Because I will not sit at his feet while another wears his name. Khan studied her, then gave a small, bitter smile. You're brave. No, she said. I'm angry. In the war room, Nevia stood with arms crossed. She's still here, she asked Raelth. Even after the bond? After the temple. Raelth didn't look at her. She's nothing. Nevia stepped closer, lowering her voice. Then why haven't you touched me once since I arrived? A pause. A long one. Raelth finally answered, eyes cold as ever. I don't need to explain myself. No, Nevia said, a smile curving her lips. But soon, you'll need to choose. She leaned in, brushing his jaw with a whisper, and I always play for keeps. Chapter 14. Lost in the Snow Valley. The sky cracked open with snow. Heavy flakes fell like ash across the narrow ridge trail, swallowing stone and sky in white silence. Liora tightened her furs, breath fogging in short bursts as the wind howled across the peaks. Behind her, Khan adjusted the straps on his pack, eyes scanning the crags above. Visibility's dropping fast, he said. We need to find cover. They'd been out 2 days, patrolling the far border where Frostpeak's claim met no man's land. It was supposed to be uneventful. Just silence. Just space. Liora had needed both. But now the snow had other plans. They found a narrow crevice in the cliff face just before dusk, barely wide enough for 2 bodies and a fire. Inside, it was dark. Close. Cold. Khan started a flame with flint and steel, his hands practiced, calm. Liora watched from the corner, her arms still wrapped around herself, her body exhausted from trudging knee-deep through drifts all day. You should rest, he said, glancing at her. You're shivering. She shook her head. I'm fine. You always say that. He sat beside her, not touching, but close enough that his warmth reached her. Even when you're bleeding. I'm not bleeding. But you're hurting. Liora looked away. Silence fell between them. But Khan was not a man of many words, only the necessary ones. He broke it with care. I meant what I said in the barracks. She didn't look at him. I meant it when I said you deserve more than him. More than being hidden in corners, punished for scenting the air. Her breath caught. He went on, voice rougher now. You deserve freedom. Equal footing. A mate who doesn't need to cage himself to stand beside you. Khan. He reached for her hand slowly, allowing her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Whatever you think your future is tied to, you can choose again, he whispered. I would never mark you without your will. Never make you beg for scraps of affection. I'd give you all of me. Every part. Liora swallowed hard. In that flickering firelight, he looked so different from Raelth. Softer. Open. Safe. And part of her ached to fall forward. To surrender to that warmth. To let herself be wanted for something other than a destiny she never asked for. But when she finally drifted into sleep, she dreamed of another. The cave had disappeared. She stood in a field of frost-touched heather, mist rising around her bare ankles. And in the center of it all was a single scent. Dark pine. Storm salt. And something electric. Her breath hitched. Her body knew it before her mind could name it. Raelth. She turned and he was there, not a vision, not memory, but presence. He said nothing, only stared. But the force of him pulled at every nerve in her spine. Every blood cell screamed toward him. Her body lit like fire. Her thighs clenched on instinct. He reached for her then stopped. Whispers rose around them, ghost voices of their bloodlines, of gods and traitors and fates long sealed. "You are not mine," she said in the dream. But he stepped forward, gaze burning. "Then why does your body beg to be?" She woke with a gasp. The cave spun. Her limbs ached. Her scent had flared. And beside her, Khan had frozen eyes wide. He could smell it. Her need. Her bonded need. But it was not for him. She scrambled to the far wall, wrapping herself tighter in her cloak, shame flushing her face. "Khan, He didn't speak for a moment. Then only said, gently, "It's him, isn't it?" She couldn't answer. She didn't need to. Outside, the storm still howled. But inside the cave, it was her heart that made the cold unbearable. And the truth that made it harder to breathe. Chapter 15. The eve of the hunt moon. The fire had burned low. Outside, the Frostpeak winds were quiet for once, still and expectant, as if the land itself held breath for what was to come. Liora slept alone in her quarters at the base of the ridge temple, wrapped in a thin woolen blanket, the stone beneath her seeping cold into her bones. But in the cradle of her dreams, the cold did not reach her. Because he was there again. The dark-eyed stranger with emberlight in his veins. Fen. This time, she stood in a clearing flooded by blood moonlight. It stained the snow crimson, and the trees whispered like tongues repeating ancient names. He approached barefoot, shadows sliding behind his steps like loyal hounds. "You come more clearly each time," she whispered. He touched her face, cool fingertips tracing the curve of her jaw. "Because you remember more now." "Who are you?" "My name matters little," he murmured. "What matters is yours, the soul blood heir of the flame moon, the last flame of the fallen moon." She blinked. "You carry what was hunted. What they thought they extinguished." "I don't understand." "You will," he said, leaning in, his voice barely a breath. "But beware, Liora. When the moon rises tomorrow, the wolves won't just come for Luna's crown. They'll come for what sleeps in your blood." She woke before dawn, heart pounding, breath shallow, every inch of her skin slick with sweat. Her wrist burned beneath the wrappings, where the flame wheel mark still throbbed like an unhealed wound. And she was not alone. Raelth stood in the doorway. Tall, silent, half-shadowed by torchlight. "You dreamed again," he said. Not a question. She sat up, drawing her blanket tighter. "Are you here to interrogate me or pretend to care?" He stepped forward, the door closing behind him with a low groan. "I came," he said, voice rough, "because I felt it too." She stilled. "What?" "Your scent flared in your sleep," he said. "It reached beyond the temple walls." Her throat tightened. "And that drew you to me?" He didn't answer. Not with words. But his body did. He moved closer. Every step was a question she didn't know how to answer. The air thickened with something unspeakable. Not lust. Not even dominance. Something older. More dangerous. A tether too deep to be unbound. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice trembling. "I never should have let you stay," he replied. "But here we are." He crouched beside her mat, eyes locked to hers. "And every time I breathe near you, I forget why I told myself not to." She could feel his heat even from inches away. His hand hovered over her ankle, not touching, but close enough that her skin prickled in anticipation. "I won't be your weakness," she whispered. "You already are." Their faces were so close now. One breath, and their mouths would meet. One breath, and the world would fall. But Raelth turned his head away, pressed his forehead to her shoulder instead. His hand finally touched her wrist, the one with the hidden flame wheel. His thumb traced the pulse beneath it. "I swore to never let myself be ruled by scent. Or bond. Or fate," he murmured. "But you undo that vow with every breath." "Then leave," she said. "I can't." He exhaled, as if hating himself. And then stood, leaving the room in silence. The torch flickered in his absence. Liora sat alone in the hush that followed, her body aching, her mind racing. If he would not be her alpha, if he would not choose her, then she would not wait to be chosen. She would earn the right to stand beside him. Or above him. When the hunt moon rose tomorrow, she would enter the trials not as prey, not as bonded, not as fate's pet, but as a warrior who would claim the Luna crown on her own terms. Chapter 16. The Hunt Moon Trial. The hunt moon rose red, like a wound in the sky, bleeding over the sacred arena carved deep into the spine of the Frostpeak Mountains. Drums thundered. The crowd howled. And the fire pit in the arena's heart roared with blue flame, its heat no match for the storm that brewed in the cold silence between two contenders. Liora and Nevia. Omega and Alpha. Outcast and heir. Liora stepped barefoot into the circle of bone dust, her ceremonial wraps loose around her limbs, every movement whispering defiance. The mark on her wrist pulsed beneath its leather bindings like a second heartbeat. Across from her, Nevia gleamed in steel and frost-threaded silk. Her expression was a blade, elegant, lethal, polished with years of training. Nevia smiled. A bondless Omega dares challenge the Luna seat? Liora didn't answer. She only met her gaze with fire. The Elder Council raised their staves. Their voices chanted the right. Let the moon bear witness. Let the blood decide. Let Luna rise. The duel began with scent. Each contender stepped forward, baring neck and chest, letting their pheromones clash in the cold air like colliding stars. The arena sizzled. Nevia's scent was sharp, full of command. Years of discipline. But Liora's was wild, untrained, untamed, and laced with something ancient. The crowd stirred uneasily. Then came movement. Nevia struck first, a spinning arc with her staff, meant to knock Liora from her feet. Liora dodged low, pivoted, and swept a leg. Nevia stumbled, but recovered fast. The dance continued. Strike, parry, lunge, twist. But when Nevia feinted left and caught Liora across the ribs, blood bloomed across her linen. The crowd gasped, and Liora smiled. Because pain was not weakness, it was permission. She rose and let it loose. From deep within her chest came a cry, not a scream, but a howl. It echoed through the mountain stone like thunder. Her eyes glowed red gold. The bindings on her wrist broke apart as if scorched by unseen fire, and in the center of her palm, the flay-wheel blazed. A ring of light surrounded her, burning, floating symbols that danced like embers. The flame blood rite, a long-buried technique, outlawed after the purge of the old royal lines. Nevia froze. The crowd staggered back. Even the elders faltered. Blasphemy, one whispered. Heretic, said another. But Liora was already in motion, faster than breath, her body half-shifted, claws drawn, eyes glowing. She moved like lightning, like prophecy. Her final strike sent Nevia crashing to the earth, her armor cracked, her pride bleeding across the arena floor. And then silence. The kind of silence that comes before the sky falls. The elders rose from their stone seats. This one bears forbidden blood, Elder Thorn declared, voice sharp. She is not fit to take the Luna name. Raelth stepped forward. Slow, deliberate. Every step echoed like the tolling of a judgment bell. He looked not at the elders but at Liora. Bloodied, breathing hard, glowing with something both holy and terrifying. And then, in front of all Frostpeak, he said, "She is Luna." Gasps rang like shattered ice. "You would crown an exile?" Elder Mira said. "A flameborn. She defeated every challenger. By outlawed means." Raelth's voice dropped to a growl. "Then outlaw me too." The elders fell silent. He turned to the crowd. "By right of trial. By the bond declared at the sacred stone. By the hunt moon that saw her strength, I name her Luna." And then he did something no alpha had done in a century. He knelt. Not fully, but enough. Enough for the crowd to break into chaos. Some roared in approval. Others shouted treason. But Liora only stood still, shaking, breathless, her heart loud in her ears. She had won. But at what cost? Chapter 17. Shadows of the Throne. The crown did not bring peace. It brought whispers. And in Frostpeak, Whispers were knives. 3 days had passed since Raelth's public declaration. 3 days since Liora's fire had scorched the sacred arena and shattered tradition like ice underfoot. But no festival followed. No Luna coronation songs echoed through the valley. No flowers were strewn at her feet. Only locked doors. And silence. She paced the marble floors of the high temple, now a gilded cage. 2 guards stood at the archway, always watching. Not for her protection, but to keep her in. Meanwhile, the council met behind closed doors. And in the far wing of the stronghold, Nevaeh played her hand. Clad in twilight blue and silver threads, she moved among the old noble houses like a wolf through snow, silent, confident, deadly. "She's not of us," she said to Lord Varrak of the Snowfang line. "She'll bring flame-blood vengeance to our gates," she whispered to Lady Mara of the Hollowtine. "She's clouded Raelth's judgment," she said, lips just near enough to Elder Thorn's ear to make him flinch. "You know what that bond has done to him." And slowly, one by one, the old names began to lean toward her. At night, in her moonlit chamber, Liora knelt before the sealed scroll Ira had smuggled to her before the lockdown. It burned her fingers to the touch, not with heat, but with memory. "Flame blood sigil, archive embers of the bone." She read. She studied. She bled onto runes as instructed. She chanted in the dead tongue, the one she'd never learned but somehow remembered. She carved the flame wheel onto wood and ash. She practiced until her skin bruised and her vision blurred. Raelth had made his choice. Now she had to be worth it. But not all wounds were forged on battlefields. That night, Raelth came to her. The guards didn't stop him. He found her bent over ink-stained parchment, hands glowing faintly with inner heat, eyes fierce and rimmed with exhaustion. "You've burned yourself," he said flatly. "Good," she replied. "Now I know I can." His jaw tensed. "You're still not safe," he muttered. "Nevaeh is already making her move," Liora said, rising. "But she'll fail." He stepped closer. "You shouldn't be here alone." She looked up at him, truly looked, past the steel mask, past the alpha. "You once told me not to tempt you," she whispered. "But now I wonder, is it me who tempts you or the idea of something beyond duty?" Raelth didn't answer. Couldn't. Because part of him had already betrayed duty the day he named her Luna. She reached up, brushing her fingers along his jaw. "I will not be your weakness," she said softly. "I will be your shield." And for once, he did not pull away. But far below the mountain, beneath the council chambers, Nevaeh's final card was played. She knelt before a mirror-etched obsidian disc, tracing the crest of Western Ridge with a single claw. "Frostpeak will fracture," she whispered. "And when it does," she smiled, "he will beg for order." Chapter 18. The Wolf King's Scars. The mountain storm had passed, but the cold remained thick in the stone walls of Frostpeak's central keep, thick in the silence between them. Liora stood before the hearth, the flame casting bronze along her cheekbones, firelight kissing the soft edge of her throat. Behind her, Raelth watched in stillness, his breath barely louder than the wind clawing at the windows. He'd summoned her to speak, but neither had spoken yet. Finally, it was Liora who broke the quiet, her voice as sharp as a blade drawn in moonlight. "Why won't you mark me?" Raelth flinched. Not visibly. Not to any other eye. But she saw it in the way his fingers curled tighter around the leather of his gloves, in the faint tremor in his shoulders. "I've claimed you before them all," he said. "That's not what I asked." She turned to face him fully. "You fight for me. You shelter me. You kneel when no alpha should. But when it comes to the one thing that would make us real, you stop. You always stop." His jaw worked soundlessly. His gaze fixed on the fire. She took a step forward. Then another. "I know what it means," she whispered. "To let someone that close. To let them scent your soul and burn it into their skin. You think I don't feel it too?" His voice was hoarse when it came. "I killed her." The silence that followed was colder than snow. Liora blinked. Raelth's gaze didn't lift, but the words once damned for years poured out like winter water breaking through ice. "She was my first bond. An Omega promised to me by treaty. Gentle. Obedient. Everything I thought a Luna should be. I waited for her heat like the elders instructed, thinking it would be natural. His throat bobbed with the memory. But it wasn't. It was chaos. My wolf surged too fast. I didn't wait. My instincts overran everything. And when I bit down, he exhaled a laugh. Bitter. Hollow. She bled for 3 days. Her body rejected the mark. She died before the bond could seal. Liora said nothing. She couldn't. Her breath caught behind her ribs. I swore, Raelth continued, never again. No mark. Not unless I knew I could stop. That I wanted the bond, not just my wolf. He finally looked at her. And this time, his eyes weren't steel. They were ash. Grief. Burnout and brittle. I want to mark you, Liora. Every time you stand too close. Every time you mouth off in council or bleed in the ring or scent the air like you were born for this mountain. I want to drag you beneath me and lose myself where your scent lives. He stepped forward, slow, deliberate. But I'm afraid that if I start, I won't stop. And I'll destroy you too. The world narrowed between them. Liora's heart pounded. Her throat ached with something not quite sorrow, not quite desire. She raised her hand and placed it gently over the markless side of his neck. You can't protect me by denying me, she said softly. I don't want your guilt. I want your trust. Raelth swallowed hard. You don't understand what it's like. I do, she cut in. Because I'm not some sacrificial flower. I've bled for this pack. I've killed for the right to stay. And I'm still here, Raelth. Still unmarked. Still yours. Even if you won't claim me out loud. She dropped her hand. The warmth lingered on his skin like a phantom brand. I won't be a regret, she whispered. I'll be your equal. Or I'll be nothing. Then she turned and walked out, her scent trailing behind her like wildfire. Raelth stood motionless. And for the first time in years, the cold of Frostpeak felt like it reached his bones. Chapter 19. Fire at the Border. The borderlands of Frostpeak were stitched in white, that morning snow-draped, still, too silent, too tense. Liora stood at the edge of the warding stones, cloak whipping in the wind, Con at her side, his voice taut with unease. They bear no crest. No envoy seal. They came without warning. They didn't need to. Her voice was calm. Low. Almost reverent. They came for me. Across the frostbitten field, a dozen figures waited in still formation. Cloaked. Hooded. But they smelled of flame. Of home. And at their front he stood. A man with dusk-gold eyes and hair black as soot, braided in the style of the ancient Highbloods. His shoulders bore the red-gold sash of the Flamebloods, long thought extinct. Yet his presence was calm. Absolute. As if he had been walking toward this moment all his life. Liora stepped forward. He did too. Liora of the Flame Moon, the man said, bowing his head. You are not forgotten. The title chilled her more than the wind. She swallowed. You know who I am. I know what you carry. And what you could become. Con reached for her, grip firm but not forceful. Don't do this. You don't know them. You don't know him. Liora turned to him, eyes wide but steady. And what do I know of anyone here, Con? I've spent every day since I arrived being feared, chained, or tested. You were seen here, he said quietly. By Raelth, even when he didn't say it. And by me. Especially by me. His words hit like a bruise. Liora's voice cracked. He never claimed me. You think that means he didn't want to? Con's tone sharpened. He's let you break every rule. He's turned against the council. He's letting you walk away. Then let him. But her defiance faltered. Because he hadn't stopped her. The man across from her extended a hand. My name is Fen. I was raised in exile. Like the rest of us. We've kept the rights. Hidden. Waiting. For you. For me. You're the last blood of the Flame Moon. The heir. The alpha-bonded Luna this realm tried to erase. But blood remembers. Liora's heart thundered. She looked up past the trees, toward the cliffs of Frostpeak. She felt him before she saw him. Raelth. High on the ridge, a dark silhouette against the snow-blind sky. Motionless. Wordless. Watching. She wanted him to descend. To demand she stay. To pull her close with the feral conviction that had always set him apart from every other alpha. But he didn't. She could almost hear him, though he said nothing. If this is who you are, then go. But no mine you remain. The ache in her chest nearly undid her. Khan saw the crack in her gaze and stepped closer. Stay, he murmured. If not for him, for yourself. I am, she whispered. This is for me. She stepped forward and took Fen's hand. The warmth was not alpha heat, not bond, not even affection. It was purpose. It was legacy. The Flamebloods turned toward the horizon, toward the deadlands beyond Frostpeak's rule. But before she crossed the final stone, Liora hesitated. And this time, he was closer. Raelth stood just beyond the tree-line. Pale hair disheveled by the wind, jaw clenched so tight it trembled. His eyes burned silver, but his face held no command. Only restraint. Chapter 20. The Cliffside Farewell. The wind at the cliff's edge howled like a creature in mourning. Below them, the ravine stretched into an endless white chasm, frost and cloud and crag interwoven. It was a place where wolves came to cast off burdens. A place where vows were broken or forged. Liora stood near the brink, her boots crunching frostbitten stone. She was cloaked in red, for the first time flame blood red, trimmed in ash gold. The sigils on her shoulder gleamed faintly in the mist. Behind her, Raelth approached. No armor. No wolves. No guard. Only the sound of his breath and the weight of what he had not said. She did not turn. You came. His voice was low. You knew I would. The silence stretched between them like the ravine itself. You said nothing at the border, she murmured. You just watched. I didn't trust myself to speak. A pause. Then I still don't. She turned then, finally meeting his eyes. They were colder than the wind, but brittle, not frozen. She saw the cracks beneath. Saw him. You never marked me, she said softly, but you claimed me, Raelth. In ways that never needed teeth. And yet, he said, stepping closer, you still go. I must go. She reached for her satchel, but before she could move, he extended his hand. In it lay a thin medallion, black and iron, ringed with crimson fire etching. The ancient crest of the flame bloodline. Long thought lost. Her breath caught. Where did you? It was found during the purge. Hidden in the ashes. His jaw flexed. I kept it. Buried it. I don't know why. She took it reverently. Her fingers brushed his. His scent surged embers over pine. Unspoken ache woven in dominance and restraint. Then why give it to me now? Because you'll need it where you're going. And because. His voice fractured. He looked down, then back up, and in that moment, the alpha mask cracked. Because I believe in you. Leora's lips parted, her heart lurching painfully against her ribs. But we're done here, she said. It wasn't a question. No, his reply was quieter than the wind. But we must be. The ache between them bloomed into a terrible stillness. A cliff not just of stone, but a feeling of fate. She stepped back. You once said if you touched me, you wouldn't let go. He didn't answer. So she whispered, then don't touch me now. He gave a single nod. Almost imperceptible. She tucked the medallion into her cloak, every movement aching. I won't come back the same, she said. I hope not. His voice was hoarse. I hope you come back stronger. Brighter. She turned away. Her steps were slow, deliberate. The wind pulled at her cloak like a final hand trying to keep her close. Just before she vanished from view, she heard it. Raelth's voice. Soft. Breaking. This time. I'll let you go. No kiss. No touch. Just breath. Just distance. And the weight of everything unsaid. She didn't stop. Didn't look back. But her tears froze before they could fall. And behind her, Raelth stood alone on the cliff until dusk fell, watching the red in her cloak bleed into the white of the world, until there was nothing left but silence. As Liora and the Flamebloods disappeared beyond the pines, Raelth closed his eyes. Khan appeared at his side, bitter in posture. You'll lose her. I already did, Raelth murmured. The moment I wanted her more than the pack. But even as he said it, his hands curled into fists like he was still holding on. To memory. To scent. To a flame that refused to die. Chapter 21. Heirs of Flame. The path into the mountains grew thinner the farther they climbed until the world itself seemed to vanish into ash and silence. Liora followed the flame-scarred cliffs in near reverence, the medallion Raelth had given her thudding against her chest with each step. The deeper they walked, the more the snow retreated, ceding to scorched stone and winds that carried heat instead of frost. They had passed into a place untouched by the northern gods. Fen walked ahead of her in silence, his long black coat billowing like the shadows of smoke trailing an invisible fire. He didn't guide with words, only with knowing. His steps never faltered. As if he had walked this exact road in dreams. As if he had waited. The path opened suddenly into a hollowed vale carved into the bones of the mountain. And there, nestled in the blackened crags, stood a village that should not have existed. Huts made of volcanic stone. Torches that burned with blue flame. And people-wolves who bore her coloring, her scent, her blood. Gasps echoed as she stepped into view. Elders fell to one knee. Children whispered. One woman reached trembling fingers toward the mark on Liora's wrist, the ember-ringed sigil of the flame moon. Blood returns, the woman breathed. Fen turned to her. This is Ashroot, the last ember of our people. From the largest structure emerged a tall, silver-haired man cloaked in deep red. His back was slightly bowed, but his voice when he spoke was clear as flint striking stone. You are late, Moonborn, he said. Liora stiffened. And you are? Areas. Flame Warden. Once counselor to your mother, Queen Selira of the Flame Blood Court. Liora's breath caught. The name struck something within her memories not her own, pain that didn't belong to her body, but echoed in her bones. Areas studied her with searing eyes. You bear her fire. But you carry frost too. That is what you must burn away. She followed him into the council hall, Fen silent at her side. Inside, ash murals marked the walls, scenes of great beasts and red moon rites, of crowned omegas seated beside alpha kings. History long erased by those who feared it. Areas sat. What do you know of the Night of Sunder? Liora hesitated. That my kind were betrayed. That you were all slaughtered. That we were betrayed, Areas corrected softly, by the very alphas we once called kin. The Frostpeak Accord was meant to bind our bloodlines. But when war came, when the North turned on our customs, they sided with the purists. They fed them our names. Our dens. Our children. Liora's hands clenched. Raelth, she whispered. He was a boy. His father made the pact. But the line of the wolf remembers. And the old blood calls you to remember too. Fen stepped forward, kneeling at her feet. You are the last. The flame moon's only heir. Take the oath, Liora. Reclaim the fire. Sit the throne that was stolen. She looked down at him, his devotion raw, boundless. He did not smell like desire. Or dominance. Or power. He smelled like home. And that terrified her. I need time, she murmured. I left something behind in Frostpeak. Not something, Areas said. Someone. But he is your past. We are your future. Liora stood slowly, the firelight kissing her skin like memory. I'm not ready to lead, she said. But I'll train. Learn. Fight. On my terms. Areas nodded solemnly. Then the mountain shall burn for your becoming. As she left the council house, Fen walked beside her again. You don't need to be her yet, he said gently. You only need to want to be her. Liora looked to the stars above the ash-blown peaks. They were red tonight, glowing low, watching. And in her heart, the fire stirred. A queen not yet crowned, but rising. Chapter 22, Fire of Desire. The night was thick with the scent of moss, pine, and something older, ash and blood memory. Moonlight cut through the trees in slanted silver lines, catching on the frost that clung to the underbrush like spun glass. Liora stood alone in the forest's breath, wrapped in the cloak Fen had given her, but it did nothing to slow the heat rising in her veins. She shouldn't have come this far. Not alone. Not tonight. But something had called her. Something she could neither fight nor name. And then, he was there. Raelth stepped from the trees without sound, his presence heavier than the shadows that clung to his shoulders. His eyes found her immediately, those cold, volcanic eyes that never truly looked away once they'd found her. Liora's heartbeat jolted. Her scent stirred in the air before she could cage it, delicate and sharp, like crushed petals smoldering on coal. He inhaled barely, and the edge in his stance cracked. "You came," she said softly, voice catching on the rim of disbelief. "I shouldn't have." She let her eyes roam. His cloak hung loose, fur-lined collar pushed back to reveal the hard line of his throat. His chest rose and fell, taut beneath dark fabric. She stepped forward. He didn't stop her. "Then why are you here?" He didn't answer. Not with words. Instead, he crossed the space in 2 strides, and suddenly, his body was flush against hers. One hand slammed into the tree behind her, the other anchored her by the waist. His scent hit like thunder. It wasn't a kiss at first. It was pressure. Heat. The brush of lips and breath as he hovered at the corner of her mouth, his silence louder than a scream. Liora trembled. He kissed her not sweetly, not slowly. His mouth crashed into hers with the desperation of a storm held too long behind dammed walls. He devoured her lips, angled her chin, tilted her head as if mapping every vulnerable angle with maddening precision. Their hips met. She gasped. He growled. The tree behind her groaned under the force of their bodies. And then he lifted her hands, gripping under her thighs, slamming her back against bark, her legs around his waist. She felt the hard line of him between them, restrained only by layers of fabric and discipline rapidly disintegrating. She bit his lower lip. He didn't flinch. He exhaled sharply through his nose and pinned her tighter, one arm locking across her back while the other explored the edge of her ribs, her spine, her neck never quite tender, never cruel. "You reek of him," Raelth murmured against her skin. "Of the boy with fire in his name." Her laugh was breathless. "Are you jealous?" "I'm dying." He spun them without warning, pressing her into the moss below. His body blanketed hers in one fluid motion. One of his knees pushed between her thighs, parting them slightly, not fully, just enough to drive her mad. She arched beneath him. He inhaled that. "You have no right to feel this," she whispered. "I feel you," he growled, teeth grazing her collarbone. "Even when I sleep. Especially when I sleep." Their lips met again, wilder this time. His kiss tasted like ruin, like all the things they couldn't say. When she tried to catch her breath, he rolled his hips once. Just once. She cried out. He pulled her arms above her head, pinning her wrists with one hand. The other slid along the outside of her thigh, then up, fingers trembling as they found the tie of her cloak. He didn't undo it. Not yet. Just held the knot like it was a fuse he didn't trust himself to light. Then his mouth moved to her throat. He licked the skin where her mark would live. A shudder tore through her. His fangs grazed the spot. Her eyes fluttered shut. "Do it," she whispered. He didn't. He stayed there, body tight, shaking. "Mark me." His lips brushed the space again, slower this time. Then, in one jagged breath, he pulled away. The absence of him felt like being torn from fire. She sat up. "You still care what comes next?" He didn't answer. His eyes, wild and empty and full, told her everything. She stood, adjusted her cloak, turned from him without another word. He watched her walk away. Didn't chase her. Only when her scent had fully disappeared into the trees did he fall to one knee, fist clenched to the earth like it was the only thing tethering him. "I would have marked you," he whispered into the moss. "If you'd asked again." Chapter 23, Echoes of the Rift. The fire did not burn its seared. Liora knelt in the heart of the flame-blood sanctum, bare palms pressed to the ancient stone. Crimson light spilled from the ceremonial altar, lapping at her skin like tongues of memory. Around her, the whispers of the flame-blood elders rose in a low chant, thick with ash and old vows. Fen stood close behind her, silent but steady, a sentinel made of reverence and belief. They had prepared the rite for weeks. But no preparation could fully temper the heat now rising from beneath her skin. The mark would change everything. "The blood accepts her," the elder intoned, voice rough with time. "Let the flame rise again." And then it came. The heat surged up her arms, raced through her spine, and clawed behind her eyes with wild, blinding brilliance. It was not pain. It was recognition. The fire remembered her. The lineage, the sacrifice, the extinction. It carved her name into the bones of the land and poured its crown into her veins. When it passed, she did not collapse. She stood. The flame-blood crest now burned faintly at her throat, a sigil of crimson and gold, shaped like a crescent biting into a sun. The council bowed as one. Liora did not. She simply looked beyond them toward the mountains, toward the ice. Toward him. Far north, in the high halls of Frostpeak, war was already stirring. The wind howled through the stone corridors as Raelth stood before his gathered alphas and betas. His arms were folded behind his back, shoulders iron straight beneath his dark fur mantle. "She's mustering an army," one counselor said. "You know it." "She's accepted the flame-blood crest," another added. "That makes her not only a rival Luna, but a royal claimant. A threat to our sovereignty." Raelth said nothing. He hadn't said much since the night he'd let her go. The silence stretched too long. Khan broke it. "We don't have confirmation that she intends to attack. She doesn't need to intend it. The blood alone invites rebellion." That voice came from Nevaeh, who stood near the edge of the room, arms crossed, golden hair braided in the Western Ridge style, lips curled in something just shy of triumph. "We cannot pretend this won't divide the packs." Raelth's jaw twitched. "She was one of us," he said finally, his voice like frost snapping underfoot. "She left," Nevaeh replied, stepping forward, eyes sharp as flint. "And now she returns as something else. You were warned." There it was. The threat was no longer Liora's scent or presence, it was her symbol. Her blood. And Raelth knew the council would not wait much longer. He gave no orders that day. But preparations began anyway. Later that evening, beneath the red moon sky, Nevaeh walked the wolf paths alone until a second shadow joined hers. A tall man, wrapped in the ceremonial cloak of Western Ridge. He said nothing, but she handed him a scroll sealed with frost wax and flame. "The Alpha grows weaker," she murmured. He hesitates. "And the Omega?" the man asked. Nevaeh's smile did not reach her eyes. "Consumed by legacy. She'll never belong here again." They walked together in silence for a time. And then the man said, "When your mate bond is forged, Frostpeak will fall under Western Ridge." As agreed. Nevaeh nodded once. And far above, the mountain winds carried neither howl nor cry, only the brittle, breaking echo of a rift once forged in fire and silence. Chapter 24, Eve of the Moonlight. The moon hung low and full, a silver wound in the sky, bleeding its light across the Frostpeak Mountains. Liora stood in the mouth of the gorge, wrapped in her flame-blood mantle, the crest at her collarbone pulsing faintly with heat. Behind her, warriors moved like quiet fire, disciplined, watchful. Fen stood at her shoulder. "Tomorrow," he said, "you speak not as supplicant. You speak as heir." Liora did not answer, because her mind was not on the battlefield or the sacred valley where the moonlight would be held. It was on the tower. The one place even blood could not touch. The ancestral tower of Frostpeak was carved into the cliffside, half devoured by ancient snow and time. No one entered without permission, not even alphas. But tonight, the sentries were drunk, lulled by peace negotiations and Nevaeh's subtle commands. And Liora knew these stones. She'd memorized their cracks with her back. She'd felt their frost in her skin. She climbed in silence. Her hands bled before she reached the window. Inside, the chamber was dark. But not empty. Raelth sat on the floor beside the altar, shackled not by chains, but by duty, his arms bound behind him, stripped of his crest and cloak. Only the scar across his collarbone caught the moonlight, a line like a brand. He didn't move when she landed. But he inhaled. And whispered, "You shouldn't be here." "I never should have come to Frostpeak," she replied, voice low, brushing frost from her palms. "But I did. And I'll always return to where I left something behind." He finally looked at her. Eyes red-rimmed. Sleepless. Hollow with too many truths. "You're wearing it now." His voice was dust. "The flame-blood crest. I am their heir. Their last." He nodded once. Then again. Like it hurt. She stepped closer. "Raelth. You came to say goodbye." Her breath caught. His silence broke then, not loud, but unsteady. A breath. A crack. A fissure in the ice he wore like skin. They voted, he said, eyes cast downward. To strip my war command. To prepare for what they believe is coming. And you. I never wanted this war. Not then. Not now. But I've been silent too long. They think my silence means obedience. Doesn't it? A pause. Then. I would have burned the summit to stop what they did to you, he said softly. But you were already gone. Her jaw trembled. She took another step forward. Raelth. He turned to her fully now, the moonlight catching on the moisture at the corner of his eye. It did not fall. It lingered, as if even his grief was bound by discipline. I don't want you to become what I once swore to destroy, he said, voice hoarse. Don't let their bloodlust become yours. Don't wear vengeance like a crown. I'm not seeking revenge. You are. And I understand. His eyes closed briefly. But I can't follow you there. She reached out, fingertips grazing the line of his jaw, and for once he leaned into it. Just barely. Just enough. I wanted you to fight for me, she whispered. I did, he replied, in every way that wasn't loud. Their breath mingled. Their scents, still dangerously attuned, stirred between them like coals and ash. Neither touched. Neither kissed. But it would have taken only one breath more. Liora pulled back first. From her cloak, she took something small, a strip of crimson cloth, woven with her blood crest, and tucked it into his palm. I go as Luna, she said. He curled his hand around it. And with a voice as quiet as snow melt said, Don't forget what part of you is mine, before the crown. Her eyes blurred. But she turned, climbed through the window again, and left him in the tower, scent still clinging to his skin like fever. Only when the moon reached its zenith did Raelth whisper, to no one but the ghosts. I don't want to lose her to fire. But even the ancestors were silent. And outside, the flame-blood banners rose with the coming dawn. Chapter 25, Crumbling Vows. The gates of Frostpeak did not fall to fire. They fell to silence. A stillness that reeked of betrayal. By the time the sun rose over the icebound keep, Nevia stood atop the high altar of the council hall, her crimson cloak billowing like blood over snow. The elder council knelt before her, some in fear, others in favor. The edict was signed in frost and sealed in ambition. Raelth was no longer alpha. She declared it without tremble, her voice smooth as polished blade. A leader who cannot protect the order of his pack has no claim to lead it. Behind her, soldiers clad in Western Ridge steel took control of the perimeter. They did not bear the Frostpeak sigil. They didn't need to. Their presence spoke enough. The old power had been replaced by a new alliance. One that did not tolerate weakness or sentiment. Raelth was locked in the Temple of Wolves, chained not by iron but by the law of his own blood. And beyond the border, fire approached. Liora rode at the front of the flame-blood host, wind and ash tangled in her braids. Behind her, dozens of cloaked figures marched with quiet resolve. The flame-blood standard unfurled in the dusk, a red ring crowned in gold flame, glinting like defiance in the fading light. She hadn't come to conquer. She came for him. But Frostpeak didn't wait to ask. As soon as her foot crossed the warding line, arrows rained. Hold fire, she shouted, voice like thunder. We come to retrieve what is ours. No one listened. Steel clashed. Old oaths cracked. And somewhere in the chaos, Khan bled. He had pushed through the ranks when he saw her arrive. Not to fight. Not to command. But to reach her. Liora. She caught him just as he staggered forward, blood blooming bright across the front of his coat. No, she whispered. No, no, no. He smiled through blood. Still stubborn. Her hands shook as she pressed against the wound. Don't speak. We'll get you to a healer. He gripped her wrist. Listen to me. His voice had no time left for anything but truth. He needs you. Not because you're flameblood. Not because of prophecy. She couldn't breathe. But because you're the only one who ever made him human. A breath. Wet and broken. Don't let him die in a cage. His eyes fluttered. Don't let him be what we feared. And then, stillness. Khan's body went slack in her arms, and something inside Liora broke with it. Her scream did not echo, it cracked like lightning through the battlefield, halting even the wolves mid-charge. In that moment, the flame-blood air rose from grief. Not as a girl, but as reckoning. Deep within the Temple of Wolves, Raelth sat unmoving, the weight of chains a mockery of strength. His eyes were fixed on the dark, but his ears had heard everything. The clash, the scream, the silence. Something snapped in him, not loud, not sharp, but final. He lowered his head, and for the first time in years, his throat opened not for command, nor fury, but for a soundless cry. Khan was gone, and Liora was no longer his to protect. She was coming, and the war would follow. Chapter 26, Embrace in the Fire. The night burned. Snow fell, yes, a steady hush of white across the broken rooftops and shattered battlements of Frostpeak's great hall. But beneath the ruin, within the deep hollow of what once stood as a symbol of Alpha Dominion, something else was alight. Liora. She came like a storm, blood on her hands, fire in her eyes. Riding through the flames of a burning border, through steel and chaos and betrayal, for one thing only. Raelth. He was caged like a beast beneath the smoldering stone, bound in silver and shadows, locked in the lowest level of the Alpha's vault. They had tried to hide him, strip him of title, of power, of voice. But they could not strip him of her. She found him. He was on his knees when she arrived, bloodied but still. The weight of chains could not bow his spine, but her presence did. When their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them, wild, wordless recognition. Freedom came in flame. She shattered the locks, melted steel, and pulled him out of the dark with hands blistered and shaking. They did not speak. They ran. Out into the snow. Out into silence. And when the forest swallowed them whole, when breath became mist and the night closed in like a secret, Raelth stopped. Liora turned. His eyes were black with strain. His scent barely contained. The bond between them had snapped taut like a tether soaked in oil, waiting for the strike. She dropped her torch. Snow caught the flame. Let it die. But heat rose. He stepped toward her. Silent. Dominant. Starved. She didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head, exposing her throat, her scent gland, the soft, vulnerable skin just beneath her jaw. A surrender. A challenge. If you mark me, she whispered, eyes glittering, lips parted, it's not destiny anymore. It's choice. Raelth didn't answer. Not in words. His hands were on her in the next breath, not gentle, but not cruel. Just claiming. Possessive. One arm looped around her waist, dragging her flush against the hard line of his body. The other gripped the nape of her neck, tilting her head back further. Their breaths collided. Their heat pulsed into the cold. She smiled, a wild, defiant thing, and pulled him down. Then he broke. His mouth dragged over her skin with reverence and hunger. No restraint now. His lips parted against her throat, his fangs brushing her gland. Her body arched, thighs clenching around his hips. He pressed her into the nearest tree, bark scraping the bare skin of her back where her cloak had fallen. She gasped, but it only made her scent spill sharper, richer. Raelth growled. Low. Deep. The sound of a man barely leashed. He kissed her like war teeth clashing, hands everywhere, hips grinding. She matched him twist for twist, biting back, fingers clawing into the roots of his hair, dragging him closer, deeper. His hand slipped between her thighs, lifting her easily as if she weighed nothing, pressing her high against the trunk. She wrapped around him like fire does dry wood, kneading, devouring. Then the bite. Sharp. Final. His fangs pierced her gland and sank deep. Her cry wasn't soft. It was wild. Pleasure and pain crashing through her in equal measure. Her legs shook. Her nails scored his back. But she didn't pull away. She pressed closer. And when he drank, it was slow. Intimate. Like the most sacred secret. Raelth shuddered. His eyes fluttered closed as her blood hit his tongue, hot and heady, like honey set on fire. His hips rolled, slow and brutal, grinding into her with the rhythm of instinct unleashed. Liora bit him back. No hesitation. No permission asked. Her teeth found the skin above his heart. She sank them in, marking him in return, branding him with her scent, her will, her fire. Their marks sealed. And the world broke open. Energy slammed through them. A bond forged in blood and choice and unbearable craving. Their scents entwined, flooding the forest in a storm of Omega and Alpha, of need met and fates rewritten. Then he took her. Again. And again. In the snow. Against the tree. On the ground where the fire could not reach. Every time different, a new rhythm, a new angle, a new unraveling. She welcomed it all. Her hands in his hair. Her body moving with his like she was born for this. For him. He never spoke. But everything he felt was in the way he touched her. Dominant. Silent. Devoted. When it was done, they collapsed together in the ashes of what had been war and silence. Raelth buried his face in her neck, still trembling. And she whispered, voice raw and certain. Not because the stars said so. Not because the blood calls it. I love you because you chose not to break me. He didn't answer. But the way he held her spoke louder than words. They lay there until the wind stilled. Until dawn kissed the ruins of Frostpeak. Two broken halves. Bound in fire. Chapter 27, Return of the Twin Sovereigns. The wind that swept across Frostpeak carried the scent of revolution. It howled not with violence, but with something older, something buried and burning, like the long-dead embers of the flame bloodline come roaring back to life. The great square of the Frostpeak Citadel, once a place of silent trials and cold decrees, now trembled with unrest. Every pack member, from the oldest elder to the youngest scout, had gathered under the weight of an unspoken truth. They had come to witness what they did not yet understand. And she stood at the heart of it all. Liora. Clad in the deep crimson of her reborn lineage, the crest of the flame moon stitched across her chest, her eyes did not flinch under the stares. The burn of judgment had long since lost its sting. Beside her stood Raelth, his jaw set, his cloak dusted in soot and blood, but his presence as indomitable as ever. Cold. Silent. Unshaken. Until she touched his hand. And something shifted. My name, Liora began, voice rippling through the icy air, is Liora of the flame bloodline. I am the last daughter of a fallen house. The air they hunted through fire and ash. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The elders paled. Nevia stood off to the side, surrounded by her loyalists, spine straight and eyes calculating. Liora's voice rose not shrill, but steady. Carved in iron. I was called an intruder. A curse. A threat to the Frostpeak Pack. But the true threat, her gaze swung to Nevia, is the one who made a deal with Western Ridge to sell this land to a foreign alpha in exchange for a throne. Murmurs turned to shouts. Loyal wolves turned wary, then angry. Raelth stepped forward, unfurling a blood-stained scroll, the letter of alliance Nevia had signed in secret. She flinched. You dare accuse me? Nevia hissed. You're nothing but an untamed Omega. I am Luna, Liora answered, unblinking. Not by his choosing, she gestured to Raelth, but by trial, blood, and the voice of the stone. I have fought, bled, and burned to stand here. Raelth's voice cut through the square then, low but final. And I stand beside her. A silence fell so thick it swallowed breath. He did not smile. He did not explain. But in the way his body turned slightly toward her shoulder, brushing hers, stance aligning with hers, every wolf in Frostpeak understood. He was no longer king alone. Liora stepped to the center of the stone platform, the sigil of Frostpeak behind her, the mark of the flame moon pulsing faintly on her collarbone where his bond still shimmered beneath skin. I claim no throne above another, she said. But I claim the right to rule beside the Alpha. As Luna. Not his shadow. Not his prize. His equal. Whispers turned into a roar. Not of rejection. Of awakening. This was not the Omega they had mocked. This was the Luna they would follow. Raelth looked at her, then truly looked, as if seeing her not as a tether of fate, but as the fire that would consume his world and make it new. And finally, for the first time in years, the Alpha bowed. Not in defeat. In recognition. In vow. In love. The era of one sovereign had ended. And from the ashes, two rose bound by scent, by soul, by scars not hidden, but bared to the pack as proof of what had been survived. The twin rulers of Frostpeak and Flame. The war had yet to be won. But the heart of the kingdom had already changed. And it beat now not for bloodlines, nor duty, nor fate, but for the choice they made. Together. Chapter 28. Thrones and Fire. The sky cracked open in a howl of ash and steel. Frostpeak's mountains, long bastions of silence and snow, now thundered with the rhythm of marching feet and drawn blades. Banners of black and gold West Ridge's colors cut through the mist like a warning, and at their helm rode Nevia, unflinching, her eyes gleaming with cold triumph. War had come, and the alpha she once sought to claim now stood beyond her reach at the side of the woman who had undone them all. Raelth stood at the ridge above the battlefield, silent, his armor flecked with frost and blood. The wolf-steel cuirass on his chest bore the sigil of Frostpeak overlaid with a single crimson flame. Not submission. Unity. Liora stood beside him, her cloak billowing like smoke against the stone wind, the flame-blood crest sewn into its lining. Beneath the silver moon, her scent carried power now, not just the sweet, wild defiance of Omega, but the smoldering heat of Luna, awakened. She turned to him, breath visible in the cold. "Are you ready?" Raelth's answer was wordless. He unsheathed his blade and charged. The battle clashed like thunder over stone. Steel met steel. Teeth met bone. Liora fought beside him, not behind, not protected, but as an equal. Her daggers moved like fire on the wind, slicing through West Ridge warriors with the precision of old rites and unforgotten fury. They fought back to back, breath syncopated, limbs bloody. Even when separated, their scents looped through the field like a tether, Alpha and Omega, burning brighter together than apart. Until a scream tore the sky. Liora turned too slow. A spear, thrown with ruthless force, hurtled toward her through the chaos. She didn't see the blur of motion until it was too late. Raelth was there. He took the blow for her. The spear pierced his side with a sickening crunch. He dropped to one knee, blood flooding dark and fast against the snow. "Raelth!" Her scream cracked, primal. She was at his side in seconds, cradling him with shaking hands, rage and terror flooding her in equal measure. He blinked up at her, pale, lips parted but unspeaking. Nevia saw it. She raised her blade, charging. But something inside Liora snapped. No, not snapped, ignited. It was not her rage she called. It was her blood. The flame blood surged to life beneath her skin, veins alight with an ancient, sacred fire. Her eyes glowed molten gold, hair lifting as if wind and flame answered her. She stood, the wind shrieking her name, and with one cry, she burned. The flames erupted from her hands, sweeping forward like a tidal wave of vengeance. They curled around Nevia's charge, consuming her weapon, her steed, and the armored soldiers who dared to flank. The West Ridge Alpha barely escaped with her life. The rest fled. The field fell silent beneath the roar of her flames. Then slowly, too slowly, Liora fell to her knees beside Raelth, hands trembling as she pressed against the wound, her scent shaking the cold with desperation. "Stay with me," she whispered. His hand strong, even now, rose to cup her cheek. "You burned for me. You bled for me first," she answered, her voice breaking. Raelth's lashes fluttered. He looked at her like he had always been waiting for this moment. And then, with quiet reverence, Liora leaned close, brushing her lips to his temple, then down to the curve of his throat. "You gave up your throne to protect me once," she murmured. "Now, I'll guard it for us both." He smiled. Faint. Bloody. But real. They said nothing else. They didn't need to. The battlefield smoldered around them. But beneath the smoke and ash, something sacred pulsed between their bodies through every scent gland, every bond, every mark. A heartbeat shared. A vow forged not in ceremony, but sacrifice. In pain. And in love. They were not simply Alpha and Luna. They were fire and frost. And they would rise. Together. Chapter 29. Night of the Embered Flame. The war ended not with cheers, but with silence. Snow fell soft over scorched earth. The scent of blood still lingered in the soil, but the flames had receded. The banners were lowered, and the cries of the dying gave way to the murmurs of rebuilding. In the hollow between destruction and dawn, peace took root. At the summit of the Frostpeak Ridge, under the stone oaths of the old gods, Liora stood beside Raelth as both Flameblood and Frostpeak bore witness. Her voice, quiet but unwavering, declared an end to the blood feud that had fractured the realm. The Flamebloods would return to their lands. The Frostpeak would stand beside them. And Westridge, stripped of honor and legacy, would be banished beyond the northern tundra. It was done. But peace, Liora knew, was not forged in declarations. It was built in what came after. That night, she brought Raelth to the sacred spring, the Flameblood sanctum carved in red stone and steam. The cavern pulsed with warmth, lined with embers that glowed like the breath of a sleeping god. Pools shimmered like molten glass, healing waters once used by kings long dead. Raelth sat with his back against the stone, chest bare, wound freshly bound. The battle had left its mark deep, jagged, still pulsing with pain, but he had survived. Because she had burned for him. Because she would again. Liora knelt behind him, fingers smoothing salve along his skin, tracing every scar like a scripture she had always meant to read. His body was a map of restraint, coiled muscle, sharp planes, heat sealed behind control. But he trembled now beneath her touch. "You should rest," she whispered. "You're the only peace I've ever known." She stilled, then leaned in. Her lips brushed the back of his neck, just above the curve of his spine, where the skin throbbed beneath her kiss. He exhaled a low sound, broken and deep, as if even that had cost him something. Raelth turned to face her then. His eyes, always distant, always dark, were wide open, unshielded, and full of her. He pulled her into his lap with a single motion, fluid, commanding, but not rough. His hand cradled the base of her skull, the other splayed over her lower back, holding her there against the rhythm of his heartbeat. "You've seen every weakness in me," he said, voice like gravel soaked in honey. "And still you stayed." "I didn't stay," she corrected, her forehead resting against his. "I chose." A pause. Then, his lips found hers. The kiss was slow, deep, built of a different hunger than war. This one asked, promised, claimed, not with desperation but with reverence. They sank together into the waters, the heat curling up their skin, sent thick with bond and memory. Her fingers found his jaw. His hand skimmed beneath her robes, not with haste, but with certainty. She shivered beneath him. Not from cold, but from surrender. Raelth's breath caught as her mouth trailed down his throat, leaving wet heat along the scars of his collarbone. He lifted her strong, steady, and set her down again, straddling his hips. Her thighs gripped him. Her breath hitched as he pressed deeper into her space, into her heat. His mouth moved to her neck, then lower. Her gasp echoed off the cavern walls like prayer. She arched, rolling her hips. He growled low and raw as his hands seized her waist, guiding her in the rhythm he set. And when he finally sank into her, she moaned not with pain but with power. She owned this. Owned him. They moved as one over and over, the spring water rippling with every push and pull. His hand tangled in her hair. Her teeth grazed his shoulder. Their bond flared bright with each thrust, each gasp, each cry stifled by skin. By the time the stars burned blue beyond the cavern's mouth, they had collapsed into each other, marked in scent and soul. Raelth's arms were wrapped around her back, her body draped across his chest. Still joined. Still warm. She traced the edge of one of his old scars, voice barely audible. "What happens now?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, "We burn the old ways." She lifted her head. "What?" "The order of Alpha and Omega. The power games. The obedience, the punishments, the fear. We end it." He looked up at her, that rare vulnerability lingering behind the shadow in his eyes. "I don't want a Luna to kneel," he said. "I want a queen to stand beside me." Leora's throat tightened. And then she smiled. A real one. Because for the first time since the gods marked her womb with fire, she wasn't a threat. She wasn't prey. She was his match. And in the ruin of all that came before, they would build something new. Together. Chapter 30. Beneath Frostpeak. Snow blanketed the valley in silence. Not the silence of grief, but of rebirth. From the ashes of war and ancient bloodlines, something new had risen. A realm no longer ruled by fear, but by fire and frost woven in unity. Frostpeak was rebuilding. And at its heart stood a queen unlike any the packs had known. Not a Luna behind the Alpha, but a Luna beside him. Liora of the flame moon marked not only by blood, but by choice. She wore no veil. No chains. The symbol of the flame blood etched into the silk draped across her shoulders, woven with the silver insignia of Frostpeak. Fire and ice, joined in one crest. And beside her, in armor dyed black as raven's wings, stood Raelth, the once cold Alpha whose silence had once ruled the mountains, and now bowed before love. Their joining would not be done in shadows. It would happen beneath the sky. At the summit of the Frostpeak range where the wolves said the gods still watched, they stood together as the wind howled around them like sacred song. The elders humbled. The packs kneeling. The flamebloods standing tall once more. No priest. No decree. Just the two of them. And a vow spoken in truth. Raelth unsheathed the ceremonial blade and held it to his own palm. He bled without flinching. Then offered the hilt to her. Liora took it, drew the edge across her skin, and as their blood met in the carved basin between them, the flames along the ancient altar flared high. Red, gold, silver, and then white. The wolf god's blessing. A wind rose that no mortal stirred, brushing their hair like breath, scattering petals of frost across their skin. The stars above pulsed once then stilled. It was done. They were bound. In soul. In blood. In power. That night, they rode alone. No guards. No banners. Only the mountain path that had once swallowed a wild, unclaimed Omega in heat and delivered her into the arms of her fated adversary. The cave was still there. The stone was colder now. But the warmth between them had only deepened. Liora stepped inside first, her fingertips brushing the stone where she'd once hidden from her own body. Where her scent had first called to a beast with fire behind his eyes. Now, the beast stood behind her. Silent. She turned. He was watching her still as he'd been that first night. But there was no battle in him now. No restraint. Only reverence. She stepped closer, and his arms came around her, not possessive. Anchoring. He'd buried his face in her neck, lips brushing the place his mark now lived, and breathed her in like air he had once denied himself. And then, so soft she almost didn't hear it. This time. I won't let you go. She closed her eyes. There were no chains here. No gods. No laws. Only the echo of what they'd survived. What they had built. Together. Beneath Frostpeak, flame met frost. And neither melted. They reigned side by side. As mate. As monarch. As myth. Epilogue. The echo beneath the peak. They say the mountains remember. Long after war is silenced. Long after blood has dried and banners have faded. The stone still holds what it has witnessed. And somewhere, beneath the frostbitten peaks, when the moon is full and the wind just right, you can hear them. A laugh sharp and unyielding. A breath quiet, aching, reverent. A name whispered not as a command, but as a promise. Liora. Raelth. The Luna who rose from the ashes. The Alpha who chose love over law. The bond that broke the old world and built a new one. Their story is not written in scrolls or carved on monuments. It is felt in the thaw of winter. In the hush of twilight. In every Omega who dares to speak. In every Alpha who dares to listen. They were fated by blood. But they became legend by choice. And still, the mountains remember. How fire met frost. And neither bowed.